Hello, I'm Tripti Nath and welcome to Awaz-The Voice. On behalf of Awaz-The Voice, I'm very privileged to have with me none other than Ambassador Saran, who is former Deputy National Security Advisor and he's convener of NatStrat, a young but promising center for research on strategic and security issues. Welcome once again to our studio, Ambassador Saran. Ambassador Saran will he's a seasoned diplomat and he will help us understand the significance of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first state visit to the United States. Ambassador Saran, could you tell us about how the unforgettable optics that we saw on television play out during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit will contribute to enhancing the relationship between India and the United States?
Well, firstly, thank you, Tripti, for hosting me and to bring me on to your show, Awaz-The Voice. It's a great privilege to be once again back.
Likewise.
Back with you. So I think this is indeed, will probably go down as one of the most historic milestones in the evolution of Indo-US relations for many reasons. And you have spoken of optics, so maybe we can begin with the optics.
Sure.
And there is no doubt that the optics were absolutely wonderful because, firstly, it was the first state visit by an Indian Prime Minister since 2009. He was the first Indian Prime Minister to address the US Congress for the second time.
Sure.
He met a wide cross-section of eminent Americans, one-on-one and collectively. He met the diaspora, he met the business community. So, all in all, and the way he was greeted in the White House with both the President and the First Lady and all the other events associated with the visit, they all show that there is a deep respect for Prime Minister Modi in the US and particularly in the White House. And it also shows that they actually regard the Indian democracy as being able to deliver and to able to come up with leaders such as Prime Minister Modi.
Right.
And they respect that very, very much. They also find that there is a level of trust between them and our Prime Minister. And that also matters hugely because a lot of this business is based on trust and faith.
Mm-hmm.
So over the many years that Prime Minister has been in office, he has built a reputation in the United States about his ability to deliver and about his commitment to furthering this Indo-US relationship. So all this is enhancing and has enhanced. So this is, I think, what we have seen on television is a reflection of all these aspects. And clearly the optics have been absolutely wonderful, commensurate with the rest of the relationship and with the substance that has come out of the relationship. We can discuss that. But yes, on the optics part, I think everything was perfect.
Right. We talked of the optics and I can't help but take note of the south lawns of the White House, which were packed with 7,000 Indians and Indian Americans. And that, I think, was truly breathtaking. So was the Thursday dinner, especially hosted by the US President and the First Lady, Jill Biden. The Prime Minister made a special acknowledgement of it, of the way Jill Biden specially took care and made his visit very special. The all-vegetarian menu, I must mention, was an endorsement of Modi ji's dietary choices. Millets were also very much a special part of it. These things are normally left to protocol, but here is the First Lady of the United States. And as you said, it's the attention to detail that they've given during this visit is a reflection of the deep respect that they have for Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Sure.
How would you as a diplomat look at these tiny but very significant elements of hospitality?
Yeah. No, I think, protocol plays a critical role in the success of any summit. And, when we receive foreign heads of state and foreign heads of government, in our case also, there are many instances, not all, but many, in which the Prime Minister himself pays attention to every single detail of the visit,
Okay.
including the gifts and everything else. So it is known to happen. And when it happens, that becomes a reflection of the political will of the host to ensure that the visit is successful, of course, but also to ensure that the relationship as a whole moves forward. Because remember that all this is not happening in anyone's personal capacity. Both President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, are representative of a huge democracy and of millions of people.
Sure.
So when they make these gestures to each other, they are actually paying respect to India and to the people of India. And we offer the same courtesies and niceties when we receive American presidents. But in this case, obviously, they've gone out, and in their system, unlike in ours, state visits are rare. They do not do state visits. Most of the visits are, this is actually diplomatic jargon, but what they do is they have working visits and official visits. But state visits in the American way of working are rare. So this, in that sense, is a special privilege. And again, they gave a state visit to only very few leaders, for example, Japan or South Korea, and now India. This is a reflection of also a strategic perspective that has to be also, factored in to understand what goes behind the decision to actually host a leader, either for a state visit or a working or an official. So all in all, yes, I mean, there was personal attention, which is part and parcel of the protocol of a state visit, because it is held inside the White House. And yes, I mean, these are all reflective of the respect to Prime Minister Modi, the respect to India, and they by doing all this, they hope that the message goes out to not just the people of India and America, but the international community, the entire global community, about how important this relationship is and how much importance the Americans are giving to India.
So that's really a privilege.
Yeah, it is a special gesture. There's no question.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who we all know is rather creative with coining acronyms, went to United States where he coined yet another acronym, and he said there's been even more momentous development in another AI, which is America and India. But beyond this creativity, which we just look at it at face value, there is a deeper significance of this acronym. I think you would know better what he meant.
No, acronyms are a part and parcel of international relations, international politics. You have so many examples available to us, including the Quad. But yeah, the America-India relationship, you had JAI, Japan, America, India.
Right.
So these are built, you have I2, U2. So, you deploy the language to popularize a strategic concept. That is the fundamental objective of using acronyms, so that, you can communicate to the widest number of people the strategic importance of a certain act that you do. So in this case, if the objective is to strengthen the bilateral India-America relationship, then using the word AI is very, very evocative, because today it is the buzzword in all capitals and in all circles about artificial intelligence. So to juxtapose it with America-India is an excellently done gesture. So I think it reflects the fact that the America-India relationship, as a result of this visit, has acquired a different kind of momentum, and acquired a qualitatively new level of trust and confidence and ambition.
The National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, and the External Affairs Minister, Mr. S. J. Shankar, and the Foreign Secretary, Mr. Vinay Mohan Kwatra, were part of the Prime Minister's delegation. What does this signify?
No, it just shows that these are the senior most advisors to the Prime Minister, and that by taking them in his delegation, he is conveying a message to the Americans that this is the kind of importance that he attaches to the relationship. Although I must say that in almost all important visits, they always accompany the Prime Minister. Sometimes the External Affairs Minister does not because of his rank and position, but in many cases he does. And each of them has played a very important role in ensuring the outcomes of this visit and, in fact, in the steady development of the relationship. So I think the NSA, Mr. Doval, has a certain role to play on the relationship, on the defense side, on the technology side, on the security side, etc. And he has his own independent channel with his US counterpart and the White House, as well as with the intelligence community in the United States. And that's critical for India's national security. Likewise, the others, the External Affairs Minister, has his own personal equations with his counterpart and with State Department and other stakeholders in the government. And the Foreign Secretary, naturally, is the senior most official who will actually be in charge of implementing everything that has been discussed and agreed upon. And he provides the leadership within the Government of India to bring this whole thing together, because there are multiple agencies, multiple ministries. So he has to steer and ensure that the vision contained in this joint statement is actually implemented. So each of them has a different role, but definitely, and they have, put their entire weight behind ensuring that India benefits as much as possible from the relationship. So there is a very palpable and a very real commitment to what is in India's interests. So India comes first. That really is the driving force when we approach such relationships. And these officials and senior ministers, this is the approach they have followed.
So I understand the delegation, the members of the delegation are handpicked by the Prime Minister, right?
Yeah, they are.
How would you decode the strategic partnership between India and the United States?
Well, you have to look at it at multiple levels. I think one is, its evolution over time. And I think what we can say with now a very high degree of clarity is that in the last maybe 2 decades at least, if not more, this relationship has progressed steadily. It has become more comprehensive. It has encompassed more and more sectors. And it has, particularly in this visit, transcended some of the most sensitive and difficult areas of our cooperation, which includes, firstly, technology transfer and sharing of technology and defense cooperation. Secondly, you have to look at the relationship, the strategic nature of the relationship, against the backdrop of the geopolitical changes underway in the world. And from that point of view also, this visit has taken place at a very critical turning point in the world, a turning point, or rather a juncture or a stage in which America's relations with Russia are probably at their worst since 1991.
Right.
And America's relations with China are also extremely tense. And so you have a backdrop where Europe is completely embroiled in a war in its continent. You have Russia, which is locked into this confrontation. And you have a rising China in competition with the United States. So it is against this backdrop that India comes into the picture. And the entry of India onto this global stage is very significant, and the American-Indian partnership has to be seen in this context of the Russia-China relationship improving as a result of various factors, as well as the growing tensions, as I mentioned to you, between America and Russia and China both. So India is stepping up into this rather complex scenario, and it's a golden opportunity for India and America to complement their strengths and to come across as a partnership which is vibrant, which represents thriving economies. Although I must say the Americans are going through bad times economically, but it is the most powerful country in the world. Whereas the fountain of optimism and growth is actually India today in the world. So for India to choose America as its partner is also very significant. So, and then of course we have our own security challenges in the neighborhood as well as internally. So the American relationship can contribute to improving our security preparedness in our neighborhood, as well as helping us domestically to achieve our national development goals.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi earned a huge applause and a standing ovation after his joint session, addressing the joint session of the US Congress. And he acknowledged it as an exceptional privilege to address the joint session of the US Congress a second time. During his address, Mr. Modi said that India is home to all faiths in the world, and we celebrate all of them. I think this is a very important message he's carried as head of the
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are sections in the American society which have repeatedly been making claims and allegations about the record of India in the terms of its treatment of minorities or human rights or other excesses. And it was important for the Prime Minister to put the record straight.
Sure.
The fact is that, as he said in the Congress, I mean, he actually went through the entire facts and figures and realities about India. He talked about the number of political parties. He talked about the number of parties which are governing different states of India. He talked about the languages. He talked about the number of faiths that are in
Diversity.
India. So he actually laid it all out on the table. And the fact is that if the people of India are electing him again and again, that doesn't mean that democracy is at fault or that there is a lack of democracy. The fact is that there is diversity politically, culturally, linguistically, in terms of religion. That diversity remains, and it is an intrinsic part of India's DNA. And I think, therefore, the Prime Minister's message in this regard was necessary to set the record straight. I mean, there seems to be some kind of a very distorted portrayal of events in India. Of course, events do take place because you have to remember that you have 1.4 billion people. That's a huge population, more than that of Africa or Europe for that matter. So isolated incidents happen, but they cannot be then equated with some systemic approach to trying to harm or weaken India's diversity. India's diversity, civilization, heritage far transcends any particular political party or individual. So I think that's what the Prime Minister was saying, that you have to look at India through a very different lens than what you're looking at today. Who are the minorities in India? I mean, this is a question. Is it based on religion? Is it based on language? Is it based on caste? I mean, what is the basis on which you define who is a minority in India? If you look at it from a religious prism, yes, I can say there are Hindus and Muslims and this and that. But I can also argue that there are linguistic minorities. There are cultural minorities. There's a Tamil minority. There's a Andhra minority. I mean, this has no end to this extrapolation.
Ambassador Saran, we are almost in an election year. in the run-up to the elections in the summer of 2024. Around this time, I think next year we will have a new government, right? How do you think the success of this visit will strengthen Modi ji's candidature as Prime Minister for the third time?
No, I mean, I don't know whether the intention was to contribute to his election prospects, which is a completely different issue altogether. I don't think the elections in India are fought in Washington or in the United States.
No, but the diaspora was huge, and it
Yes, but the diaspora
showed his popularity.
But the diaspora is not exactly voting also.
Right.
So, but the fact is that he has come across as a leader of global stature. And the fact that he's received, and the fact that he spoke in Hindi in Washington, the fact that he was a representative of Indian culture, all this, of course, will strengthen his image and be appealing to the Indian electorate. That here is someone who has risen from a humble background and is today commanding such respect in the most powerful country in the world. So, yeah, from that point of view, for sure, it will reinforce his image within his followers and the Indian electorate about the leader that they have.
Ambassador Saran, how would you interpret the Prime Minister's decision, which came as a surprise, to hold a joint press conference with his US counterpart?
Again, it's part of the optics of the visit, and it's the attempt to be transparent and to connect with the people. That's the word the Prime Minister used repeatedly. So I think it was deliberately done because both leaders want to come across as leaders who are ready to connect to the people, and also who want to kind of continue with this tradition of transparency in the relationship, and that there are no hidden issues. And if there are differences, which there are bound to be, they are not fighting shy of facing those differences or addressing those differences. So all in all, I think it was part and parcel of a much more mature relationship between two democracies.
How do you think this visit can enhance India's position in the global south?
Well, global south is something which is watching closely because they view India as one of their own. And if they see that India is able to raise the issues of concern of the global south in front of a country like the United States, then it is something which they feel will be useful to them. Because what do you want as global south? You want your issues to be brought to the attention of the established global powers. Because the established global powers must know that there is a community of people out there in the world who have very important concerns and problems. And so I think from that point of view, his vocalization of these concerns in front of the president, in front of the US Congress, are all for the good.
Ambassador Saran, how would you look at the growth in economic ties and trade ties between India and the United States since 2014?
I think they're developing very handsomely. We have a trade today of $191 billion. It's our largest trading partner. The huge investments on both sides. Massive diaspora, Indian diaspora, doing extremely well. There is much happening in the field of innovation, in the field of niche areas of technology. So all in all, I think the integration of the two economies and the construction of supply chains, including critical materials, critical minerals, semiconductors, high performance computing, there's a whole array of sectors where the two sides are actually cooperating. So I think the evolution of the economic and trade relationship has been excellent. But remember, if today you're at $191 billion between you and the Americans, the Chinese are already at $600-700 billion with the Americans. But that is also because of the size of the Chinese economy. Mm-hmm. But, tomorrow, as Prime Minister said in his speech to the Congress, in 2014, when he became Prime Minister, India was the 10th largest economy in the world. Today, it is the 5th largest, and it is soon going to become the 3rd largest. So all this requires that you hook up with the richest country in the world, or rather the largest economy of the world. There is no other alternative but for you to hook up with the largest and the most dynamic economy of the world.
And we have a Gujarati Prime Minister who has the business acumen to do that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Lastly, I would like to ask you, how do you think China would be looking at this extraordinary bonhomie that has been created during this visit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the US President Joe Biden, and the Indian Americans and the Americans?
Well, the Chinese strategic community, I would expect, will be vocal in talking about how the Americans are trying to woo India, and how India is falling prey to American largesse and American, let us say, the embrace. But the fact is that if they are truly introspective, they will realize that if India is going this way, assuming it is, this has a lot to do with China's own behavior towards India. So, you talk about Russia being driven into Chinese arms because of what the West is doing to Russia. Mm-hmm. Here, at a very simplistic level, and I don't agree fully with the proposition, but for the sake of argument, this is a case where India is being driven into American arms because of Chinese behavior. So, China, there will be commentary and they will be watching closely. But the fact is, what has happened in Washington is not because we want to send any message to China, but it is because of the intrinsic merit of the relationship and what the relationship can provide to both India and America. So I think China should be ready to live with a close India-US relationship, just as we are ready to live with China's own relationships with third countries. I think the real issue for China to focus on is how can they reset and recalibrate the way they look at India and the way they deal with India. They keep talking about core interests and the core of the core interests, etc. But they sometimes lose sight of the fact that even India could have core interests, or India could have core of the core interests. So they have to do a lot on the border, on the line of actual control. They know what they have to do. And so the task is actually cut out for China. We are ready for having good relations with China. They are a neighbor. But this is a relationship like any other, which depends on both sides. It is not possible only for one side to show goodwill. So I think the Chinese have to make amends for what they did in 2020.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Saran, for giving us a bird's eye view of the India-US relations, the way it is progressing, the wonders that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has done during his visit.
Thank you.
And the deep impact and the everlasting impact it will have on helping the two world leaders and future world leaders to progress along the contours of this relationship. I think the visit was a historic milestone. And thank you also for giving a prescription to China as an epilogue. Thank you very much.
Chinese, no, thank you so much. Thank you.